The Gospel according to John. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. And Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him, the one that Moses in the law and the prophets also wrote. This is Jesus, son of Joseph of Nazareth." And Nathanael said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip said, "Come and see." Now when Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him, he said of him, "Well, here is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." And Nathanael said, "Where did you get to know me?" And Jesus said, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." And Nathanael said, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." And Jesus said, "Do you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? Well, you will see greater things than these." And he said, "Very truly, I'm telling you, you will see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." The Gospel of the Lord. Hi, St. Paul. I'm Pastor Clark. We get to spend some time in Bible study again today. I am enjoying reconnecting with learning the Gospel by memory, and that's what I've just done. Our reading from this coming Sunday by memory. It's a gift to be with you. Now, one of the things I was thinking about, for however long this video is, 15 minutes, 20, 25 minutes, whatever, that will be 15 or 20 or 25 minutes where you're not, doom scrolling through Facebook or checking the news again, or, I know last week was a tough week, and I certainly have spent a lot of time reading news sites, etc., etc. But, and even though I came to reading the Gospel of John with perhaps this, an awareness of those events, an awareness of, wondering if there was a word to speak about that this week. And maybe there is by Sunday, but there's just no obvious connection from this gospel reading, and that there's no need to force that, no need to make connections that aren't really there. Maybe a different preacher, pastor would find them. But I guess I'd put it this way, is that, here's 15, 20, 25 minutes where we can really practice what is true. And that is, being an American is not the most important thing about you or me. Being an American honestly doesn't matter all that much, insofar as we belong to Christ. First and foremost, we are members of the body of Christ. We are children of God, first and foremost. And this could be an opportunity just to let go of that. A lot of us, I know there's lots of St. Paul people who pray, even daily, for the nation, who see the work of making change in this country, even in their community, as a part of the calling of their faith. And amen. God bless you and all of us. There's also many of us who don't know what our faith has to say about this situation, about the moment of history that we're in. Okay. There's no, you don't need to prove your love to Jesus one way or the other. It's all good. It's all love, it's all bonus, it's all grace. But one thing I do notice about this reading from the gospel is that there is. So first of all, I'm sure you've told meeting stories before. Okay, so this might be the story of how you met your spouse. Maybe it's the story of how you met a very good and important friend. I know that whenever I tell those stories, certainly when I tell those stories about meeting Sarah, there's always humor in it, because there's always some kind of expectation that was not met, or there was a first impression, that proved untrue, or off base, or there's certainly maybe a way that we responded that with the benefit of all this hindsight we see is silly. My first impression of Sarah was that she was a Lutheran princess. First time I met her, when we were sitting around a class introducing ourselves, Sarah introduced herself, and then the professor stopped the introductions and said, "No, you need to know who Sarah Olson is and who her dad is," and listed the books that he wrote and the work that she was doing before she came to seminary, etc., etc. And I just rolled my eyes. Little did I know. There's something of that going on in this story in fact, some commentators have suggested that perhaps it's Nathaniel who's telling this story. The one whose expectations were just totally changed. Maybe it is. And his first response, can anything good come out of Nazareth? I've also read that it's likely that all these folks knew each other already. That there's this kind of an overlap of this region, this relatively small part of a relatively small country, and that there are business or family or whatever else that would have brought Jesus and Philip and Nathaniel, Andrew and Peter into contact with each other, that they would have, at least known of each other. And that perhaps there was the same kind of, the good-natured, perhaps, at least a competitiveness or a ribbing of each other and their towns, rivalries reflected in this, can anything good come out of Nazareth? But there is a sense of, there is such a sense of joy. And I think certainly, like those other meeting stories, me meeting Sarah, you meeting other people, that there is a deep love and a depth of relationship that those stories speak to, even though in the early, those first moments, first impressions may be humorously out of sync with what our relationships have become. Come and see is a phrase that's repeated by many Christians as a way of describing what we get to do in inviting people. The gospel, maybe you're curious. I'm a little curious. How did Jesus find Philip? And how did Jesus find Nathaniel? I don't know. Just very matter-of-factly reported. But what we have instead is a story of how Nathaniel found Jesus. Not just finding in terms of locating, but in terms of awakening to who Jesus was, who Jesus really was. And there is a letting go. Nathaniel, that it is very natural, spontaneous. There's not a process of working it out. There's just a moment of recognition. And that moment of recognition of who Jesus really is, is the finding for Nathaniel. We maybe there's a moment like that for you, of finding Jesus. I'm not really. It was part of my growing up, but I'm not really big on that whole kind of. I, I don't mean it in the like finding the Lord, in the terms of finding religion, of cleaning up our act, that kind of thing. Though that's certainly maybe part of it, for some of us. Um, Awakening to a presence. That's this line here about, where did you get to know me? And Jesus says, I saw you under the fig tree, before Philip called you. There's I think the kind of obvious implication is that this is a sight beyond normal human seeing, beyond, it's not like Jesus just passed by there. There's a sense of something supernatural going on here. And, not just a sight, but a presence, right? That Jesus's presence was under that fig tree with Nathaniel, perhaps alone, Philip, it was before Philip called him, so not necessarily that Jesus was eavesdropping on their conversation. When is that moment for you? Like, when did God become real for you? You may have different language to talk about it than recognizing a presence, but there is a kind of an awakening that happens for Nathaniel. And there's certainly the enthusiasm that follows matches the enthusiasm that Philip had when he found, we have found him. We have found him. That's that finding language, is Jesus found Philip. Philip found Nathaniel, saying, we found Jesus. And then it's not said of it, but it is a story of Nathaniel finding Jesus as well. When did Jesus become real for you? When did faith become real for you? When did God become real for you? There's a story there, maybe with some of the same kind of humor that's part of this story. What's then there's the twist. There's always the twist in all those stories of meeting. Every romantic comedy, for example, there's always the twist. But one of the twists here is after Jesus finds, or Nathaniel finds Jesus. Jesus saw him, but then there's the turn of it's not going to be about what Jesus saw. It's going to be about what Nathaniel sees. You will see greater things than these. You will see heaven opened. Maybe you'll remember that last week we were reading from a different gospel, and I often, it's good to listen to each gospel individually so that we get a sense of the character of Jesus in each gospel. What's the facet of the diamond that's revealed uniquely in each gospel. But it is interesting that last week we heard this story about Jesus seeing the heavens open to him and the Spirit descending on him. There's an overlap here. There's this is the wording is kind of funky. The angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man is kind of a funny turn of phrase, but it's actually a very specific reference to a story in Genesis about Jacob. Now, Jacob was not looking for God in any way. Jacob had merely, created a number of messes and was kind of on the run. and was kind of sleeping out in the open in the wilderness. There he had a rock for a pillow, and in a dream, in a kind of a vision, he has a vision of angels and a ladder. Angels climbing up and down a ladder between him and the place where he was at and heaven, right? So that's where the phrase Jacob's ladder comes from, and there's a great spiritual, Negro spiritual of Jacob's ladder. That's what Jesus is referring to. And after Jacob wakes up, he says, I'm going to name this place, X, which means, God's really in this place. It's again about our waking up to presence, and presence and a relationship that we didn't even know existed. Maybe that has that happened for you. I certainly hope that it has, and I also am. I expect that if it hasn't, that it will. There's this sense for Jacob. Jacob wasn't out there looking for God, and so there's hope for us, right? Maybe Nathaniel was, maybe he wasn't. I think we have suggestions that he perhaps was. Otherwise, why would this appeal from Philip? We've found the one whom Moses and the law and the prophets wrote. Maybe that suggests that he was waiting with a similar hope and expectation, looking for the same, for the same one that Moses and the prophets talked about. I don't know. Then again, maybe not. But that doesn't lessen the surprise for Nathaniel. The angels ascending and descending. I started a new book. I think I mentioned I finished reading Teresa of Avila. I've started a new book by James Finley called The Contemplative Heart. And he was talking about his three principles of what it means to live a contemplative life. And here it is. The first one is the divine in just the way things are. That there's a divinity in the way things are, just as they are now. Okay, so let me get through them and then I'll comment. Okay, so then that's the first one. The divinity of the way things just are. Just the way things are. Yep. So the second thing is our ignorance of that divinity. Our ignorance of the divinity of the way that things just are. Our ignorance of it. And so which creates, he goes on to say, which creates this sense of homelessness. Or we have a sense of, we feel homeless, even as we are unknown to ourselves in our own homes. At home in God, in a sense, is kind of what he's saying. And so it leads to the third principle, is this sense of awakening, this sense of homecoming, coming home to the very place where we are right now, where we already are. So his encouragement is to find a practice, a spiritual practice, and practice it, to find a community, a contemplative community, a community of spiritual practice, and join it, to find a teaching, a spiritual teaching, religious teaching, and learn from it, practice it. He's speaking in a way, he's Christian and comes from the Catholic tradition, and but speaks in a way that could be open for anyone, and we would maybe substitute in that last one about practicing the faith, the Christian faith. But the point is, there's something about that I feel like that happens in this reading of there is Jesus is that divine, that divinity in things just as they are. Nathanael didn't even know it when he was under that fig tree. He was ignorant of it. And yet it's still, that was not disqualifying. That's one way to read this as good news, is our ignorance of the divinity of things just as they are, our ignorance of the presence of Christ right here and right now in this very moment, or in, fill in the blank of any other moment. Our ignorance is not disqualifying. Instead, there's an invitation, just like a constant invitation: follow, follow, follow me. So that our lives, we begin to become more intentionally aware, that we begin to learn about ourselves more and more, that self-knowledge that will help us understand why we go looking in all the wrong places, or what have you. Jesus certainly seems to have an insight into who Nathanael really is. This is actually another one of the jokes in this story, because going all the way back to Jacob, who himself is renamed Israel and becomes the father of this nation and of the faith, is a trickster. Practices deceit, always has an agenda that he's working on, always scheming. And so there would have been, to say, here's truly an Israelite in whom there is no, trickery, scheming, deceit. There's a little joke in that, in that kind of the way, people would have understood themselves at that time. Jesus knows something about who Nathanael is, knows who Nathanael is at his core, because Jesus has been present. And I think the implication is not just in that moment under the fig tree, but Nathanael's whole life long. So many of the calls to the prophets, Prophet Jeremiah is a great example of God says, I before you were, when you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. Before that, I knew you. And when you were there, I knit you together. It's this realization that, this conversation, that what Jesus said to Nathanael so echoes that call to Jeremiah. That's the recognition of there is someone who has known and loved you from before you were born. It has been present in every moment of your life till now. And I have to tell you that sense of like the divinity of things just the way they are. That thought came to me later in the day, later in the day-to-day when I was, so I was helping Amos out with his schoolwork, his reading. I was on for school at home today, and there's just a way that my anger gets triggered in those moments with Amos when I feel like he's not putting in his 100%, or joking around or distracting himself right before he gets to the answer. I'm so mad. Like I've gone from 0 to 6,000 and just like that. And that line came back to me, the divinity of things just the way they are. Here is a dwelling place also of the divine, of Jesus, of Christ, with me just the way they are, which with us just the way things are. That includes my anger, that includes whatever's going on with Amos, just this moment of us being together, right? There's God, right? There is the one who deserves all of our allegiance. You are the King of Israel. That is, there is no other. You are the one. that moment erupted for me. Maybe a moment like Nathaniel's. But I pray that you are awakened, whether you're seeking it or not, to the divine presence in things just the way they are in your life, in the life of this nation. See you later.